Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily, brought to you by Browns and You. I'm your host, Chris Bergin, joined with Jonathan Chilia. Today, how are you, Jonathan? How was your weekend?
It was good. I finally visited a restaurant, but we'll get into that in a second. Let's go through the headlines right now.
Yeah, we'll go through the headlines. So we've got restaurants and hairdressers opening after months of restrictions. We'll talk a bit about the reactions, the mixed reactions, and some political mishaps over there as well. We also have news today that Malta is paying up to 7 times more what Europe does for gas, and why that's happening. This morning we started with a very bad note in Malta. There was an arson attack on a journalist and on a guy who is the Floriana FC Secretary General, ahead of an important league decision. Maltese football is under the spotlight today. We'll talk a bit about what's happening over there. Also, we'll talk about the university skiving scandal that's rocking the police corps. So after we know that there's a lot of scrutiny right now about what's going on in the police, and a story about a stingray in Blue Lagoon leading to a sailor calling for more sustainable tourism in Malta. What's going on over there? Jonathan, can we start with the first story, the restaurants and hairdressers opening to the public?
Definitely. That's the tastiest and most stylish story we have today, I'm sure. So obviously, guys, I'm very sure you're aware, this weekend was a big weekend for Malta and Gozo. After 2 to 3 months of restrictions, lockdown, quarantine, restaurants, hairdressers, beauticians, and those type of establishments have finally reopened. Of course, as long as they're in compliance with the new regulations. So this comes after a week of scrambling for a lot of restaurants and establishments to get their places in order. And from the 2,000 to 3,000 restaurants in Malta, only about 340 have opened. Only those have passed the inspection and are in line with measures, but super to see them opening. I myself went out to a restaurant in Malta Saturday night. I actually wrote about it. You can find all these stories on lovinmalta.com. And I got to say, it was fine. I mean, obviously, when I was walking to the restaurant, at first I was a bit wary, after months of instinctively avoiding groups and congregations of people, walking towards them and sitting down near them was a bit of a strange moment, but it was super fine. Waiting staff were masked up, sanitized. I felt really safe and secure. So I can see like the precautions are being followed and it makes a difference. However, not everyone had a great experience, at least when it comes to feedback afterwards. The Abelas headed down to a Shara restaurant in Gozo, I think Oleander restaurant, to have a meal with the Minister for Gozo, Clint Commineri. Looked like a super meal, but there was a bit of backlash after they uploaded a photo. And it seems in the middle of the table, there was a big, nice bowl of chips. And a PNMP, David Thake, took to Facebook and asked, are those chips to share? Or does Robert Abella just really like his fries? I just want to make a quick note. It's not banned per se to share meals. However, things like buffets and those type of meals have been banned. But I mean, I've been to a restaurant. Have you been to a restaurant or a hairdresser yourself, Chris?
Yeah. So I've been to a hairdresser. I'll talk a bit about that soon. But I think on this Abela story, I mean, I think it's totally a storm in a teacup. I mean, it's and I'm really not on team sort of COVID busting. I think like this idea that we like stay looking for every little photo and detail and whatever to just shame people for trying their best in this scenario. I think it's silly, and I don't think it's worthy of an MP doing that, to be honest. And I like you said, I didn't go to a restaurant this weekend yet, but I did go to a barber. He did the best he could with my self-styled quarantine haircut. And you know what? You mentioned that there's 340 restaurants out of thousands that open. I imagine even for hairdressers, barbers, beauticians, it's probably not 100% either. And there's a number of reasons to it. I mean, I had a great experience as well when I went to the barber. They were very careful about sanitizing, about making sure everyone's wearing a mask. They don't do beards anymore. They just stick to the haircuts. They sanitize the chair beforehand. They give you these plastic covers. They have to wash your hair. They can't not wash your hair anymore. So there's a real lot of restrictions. People are waiting outside, and they were followed very well. But all those restrictions from a financial point of view are not only increased costs from all the sanitizer. I know we had from restaurants who said they were spending a fortune on sanitizer every day, and that was eating into their profits. But then there's also the cut in revenue by having so few customers. So you know, at the barber, for example, whereas before you could have like 12 stations, you know, those have been whittled down to about 4. So yeah, it's tough times for these people. But I must say, they seemed so happy to be back at work, to be able at least to be doing something and not stuck at home, unable to pursue their business. So really sign of encouragement, and you know, guys, keep at it. Let's keep things going. There was a very strong message, I think, from the Prime Minister yesterday in terms of, you know, giving people the courage to continue. So hopefully we'll see more places opening over the next few days and weeks. On another story, we find out today that Malta's gas prices are 7 times higher than the European average. So Malta is paying $11.50 compared to $1.81 or globally, or $1.67 as an EU average. So this is, you know, ludicrous pricing. As we know, one of the few benefits of the COVID pandemic have been, you know, a reduction in price of oil and things like that. But Malta is still suffering from a deal it signed, you know, many years ago now, I think 2013-14, with Electrogas and Soca, a very controversial deal that has been, you know, written about extensively in terms of corruption by journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, who, as we know, was killed. We know that this is a very controversial deal. I must say this, I mean, when it comes to buying oil and gas, you know, Malta has always been one to sort of hedge its prices and buy, you know, at a certain price to guarantee pricing over a span of time. And you know, with that kind of with that kind of approach, there's always going to be times when you win and always going to be times when you lose, and when you lose, it kind of looks really bad as well. You know, in this unprecedented situation where prices have gone down to a record low, it looks even worse. But I think, considering that and considering so many other problems surrounding this deal, it starts to become, you know, you start to think, you know, what exactly went on here, and how quickly can we get out of this situation. April 2022, I believe, is the deadline for these fixed prices to be renegotiated. Yeah. I know the Minister of Energy, Michael Farrugia, has yet to comment about the situation. What do you make of this, Jonathan?
You know, it's a sucky situation for Malta to be in. I mean, there's economic problems around the world, in Europe and in Malta. The last thing we want to be doing is be paying so much more. I mean, I think it's a 588% markup. That's absolutely unacceptable, and we're locked into it till 2022. Not a good look, guys. Not a great situation. As you said yourself, you know, when you're hedging the price, it's a risk. But like, I think this is going to be a big lesson for future governments. If we're going to be hedging prices again, let's make sure we get it right. I mean, this is absolutely unacceptable to be paying 7 times more than the rest of our European brethren when it comes to gas, which is essential. Not a good look, Malta. Hopefully, we won't be put into a situation like this again. Talking about not a good look, moving on to our next story. As you said yourself, you know, an arson attack on a Maltese journalist and the Secretary General of Floriana FC. So Dione Borge, who's also a former PN MEP candidate, his car was put on fire last night in Attard at about 11 p.m. Many other councillors and politicians have showed solidarity with him. People have called the arsonist a responsible coward. But this is a really shocking thing, because arson in Malta, unfortunately, is not as uncommon as you think. We actually did a study that back in 2018, a car was being burnt every 2 days in Malta, which is a really high number. So while we don't know exactly why Dione Borge's car was burnt, it is very important to remember that today there's a very important football decision being taken by the Malta Football Association to determine who will be winning this year's football league. Obviously, the league was postponed due to COVID-19. I know different countries took different approaches, but in Malta, we just suspended it. And now the council will be taking a decision tonight, this evening at about 4 p.m., 4:30. The thing is this. Two of the biggest rivals, Floriana FC and Valletta FC, they've both won 25 leagues each. And Floriana is in first place. So if the MFA decide that Floriana will win the league today, they will have more leagues than Valletta, which I'm sure will not make Valletta supporters very happy. Now, we don't know who caused the arson, but it's very important to remember that this time last year, last May as well, an iconic 120-year-old Festive Arch in Floriana was burned down. We had reported on that as well. So it seems every May, Floriana is getting some fire attacks, and it's really messy.
I think, you know, first and foremost, Dione Borgi is a journalist, a reporter who's you know, very visible on net television. And, you know, Malta has now, you know, a terrible record when it comes to violence against journalists. So, you know, this is another horrific incident that has zero justification, and we really need to get to the bottom of it. It's a good sign that the arsonist seems to have been caught on camera. I don't know if I don't think the person is visible in terms of identifiable, but I think that it confirms that it was an arson attack, and I think this is something that we really need to not tolerate at all. Going on to the football point, which I think is quite interesting. You know, you've got places like Italy that have decided to continue their leagues without spectators. You have places like France that have just appointed the people who are at the top of the table at the time, which in Malta's case would be Floriana. And then you've got places like the Netherlands that didn't give the title to anyone. Now we know this is very controversial because, you know, even though there is a team at the top of the table, there could be, you know, the other teams are not far off. I think Valletta is off by about 3 points, which just means one win. There are a lot of other games to be played. So it is a tough decision. Let's hope the football community can reach some sort of unanimity around this at all. And because there are also, I guess, consequences to being given the title or not, and not just in terms of pride, although pride is a very big element, because if you haven't won the league since 1992 and you're now, you know, you've got the chance to beat your rival by one more title, you know, you can understand how tensions are rising over this sport. Having said that, you know, arson, I mean, this is outrageous, and these things need to stop. You know, it's a high time we start being able to deal with our arguments in civil ways.
Like, guys, if you are a football fan or a sports fan and it comes into your mind to burn someone's car over some sports or a game, don't do it, okay? It's not a good idea, not acceptable, not cool. So just avoid the fire, avoid the arson.
So next story, we have yet another police scandal. Lovin Daily wrote about this over the weekend. We have a number of police officers who are accusing their superiors of using taxpayer money to get their law degrees and then becoming lawyers instead of staying at the police force. So we know that the police force has tried to invest in a prosecution department. You know, keep in mind that when a crime is being prosecuted, you've got like very well trained criminal lawyers, very well funded, making decent amount of money, and having a lot of experience in this field. And then you have, you know, the officers, who many of whom haven't even done law degrees, you know, and they're having to kind of contend against the criminal lawyers. So you know, it was a good initiative to have police officers given the chance to get their law degree and improve the level of prosecution. However, it seems that in many cases, as soon as these guys got their law degrees, they went into the private sector instead. So police didn't gain much from it. And worse than that, you know, these traffic officers who are in the midst of this overtime scandal and being told, you know, you're frauding the taxpayer, you're money laundering because you're registering more overtime than you should. They're seeing their superiors having, you know, taken time off to study, to do assignments, to be at lectures, to have their driver waiting for them at university, and then to be getting a degree and leaving. We also had over the weekend a reaction to this story by Mary Muscat, one of the candidates who is vying for the role of police commissioner. We know there are about 15 candidates seeking that position right now. She reacted to the story by saying, she had warned that all hell would break loose, and she had said that this is one of the reasons she was thinking twice about contesting for this role. However, she denied having done any skiving to get her law degree. She actually got her law degree from a similar scheme a number of years back, but she's saying, this wasn't in any way a result of her skiving from her duties. Actually, she's still fulfilled them. So again, another police story. We're going to have to see how things proceed over the next few days and weeks, especially in particular to this role of police commissioner.
I mean, I think what's really important here is that we remember that this comes alongside the massive investigation, as you touched upon, into fraud and money laundering, into the grunts, as it were, the traffic corps officers. For 3 months now, they've been either on suspended, they've either been suspended or no pay or half pay. I know a lot of these officers have suffered personally. I know there was even a story saying that these officers were trading fines for sexual favors. I know one officer even had marital issues because of these stories. So this investigation has really, really affected Malta's traffic corps, and over half of them are being investigated. So as that's happening, seeing their superiors, I mean, I was speaking to one officer just this week. He was saying just this week, while the race for commissioner is on, they're doing dissertations in office, they're doing their thesis in office. So, these are things that are happening right in front of officers' eyes, and at the same time, they're being called fraudsters or whatnot. So I have a feeling there's a lot more to see here. The race is not over yet, so let's definitely stay tuned and see what develops in this story. But moving on to our last story, and it's a bit of a sweet story here. A stingray appeared in Blue Lagoon, in Comino's very famous Blue Lagoon, and a sailor has taken the opportunity to say, listen guys, look at this rare wildlife. Remember a time when lobsters used to teem the floor of Blue Lagoon, when there used to be octopuses, when there used to be stingrays swimming around? We need to have a new approach to a more sustainable tourism for Comino, for the Blue Lagoon, if we want these type of animals, this marine life, to be appearing more in Maltese waters. Now, Chris, I don't know about you, but I didn't know that stingrays were available in Malta. I mean, I've dived a bit around Malta. If I ever came across a stingray, that'd be awesome. That'd be super. If I came across some lobsters, that'd be awesome as well.
Yeah, I think look, we've seen wildlife both not just in the sea but in general take breathe a sigh of relief from the lack of economic activity and human activity over the past few months. And it is a bit of a wake-up call, I think. But there's also, I think, going on what the sailor said, there's also a wake-up call from an economic point of view in terms of, should we, now that we know that travel is going to be probably restricted for a while, even when the airports reopen, there's probably going to be lots of people, especially vulnerable people, who are going to be afraid to fly. It's probably going to be more expensive to fly because there'll be all these restrictions, like we're saying for restaurants and hairdressers, that it's going to be even more restrictive when it comes to flying, So it does make sense for Malta to start rethinking its tourism strategy. Do we just go for numbers, or do we start to, try and go for more quality tourism, and maybe try and attract more high-end tourists to spend more, so we don't need such a burden on the ecosystems, having, Blue Lagoon packed as it always is, and other beaches like that. Having said that, this is a bit like having a very, very rundown car, having abused it for 10, 15, 20 years, bumpers falling to bits, there's no paint on it, everything doesn't work, very little service, and then saying, oh, we're gonna pitch it as this executive lounge for the most high-end earners because that's what benefits us. Ultimately, we're gonna have to, if we're gonna do that, we're gonna have to really improve our product, improve our service, and improve the kind of quality that we can achieve. And in many cases, things like that might be quite difficult to roll back, especially when it comes to our planning and construction. Some areas in Malta have been totally deteriorated because of this. There was a photo being shared online the other day about Schlendi, such a beautiful place, but it's been taken over by blocks and blocks and blocks of apartments. So anyway, we'll see how the authorities respond to this tourism idea. That takes us to the end of today's program. So we will just finish off with the tip of the day from Browns and you. So a little tip today is just to, create a routine at home, keep your children and yourself busy. By the way, some good news about childcare centers and summer school should be, there is a plan for those to go on. So, but until then, keep your children and yourself busy. Take the situation as an opportunity to bond with your children, whether it's helping out with the chores. Everyone wants their kids to help out a bit more with the chores, or playing board games together. Find those opportunities and make the best of them during COVID times. I think that's all for us today. Join us for COVID Calls is back this afternoon. We'll start at 4 p.m. today. We're going to be discussing open air cinemas and the theater and cinema industry. So join us at 4 p.m. and join the discussion. That's it for us. From us, John. Have a day full of loving. Take care.